Hey guys, in this episode of Thinking Caps, we tackle privacy, but not so much the privacy of what we're all going into and the hurdles we face in the future. We listen through the lens of Tom Flanagan, former EVP Leo Burnett, and he gives us the breakdown of how privacy hit us in the past, how we've dealt with it, and has great examples. So don't fret, privacy is nothing new. We've dealt with it before, and here's a great point of view on that. Hey guys, welcome back to Thinking Caps. This is a very special episode. We do not have Richard Jones today. I am Tim Glom, VP of Content at CHEETAH Digital, and I have with me a longtime great friend, Tom Flanagan. Tom, thanks for coming in. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for getting dressed up for me today.
Yeah, t-shirt and a thinking cap. Hey, listen, people, the reason this is a very important podcast to me, it's our first guest in the Thinking Caps series, but also it's important to me because Tom is the one who really got me into brand marketing. He brought me into Denver, got me into the whole content and big brand play. So huge mentor to me. But Tom is a vet here, like from all sides of the fence. I could talk for days about the reasons that you need to listen to Tom, you need to know Tom, you need to follow Tom. Tom Flanagan, LinkedIn, Dive Bar Beer on Instagram, which we'll get into, is really cool. But Tom is a guy who, decades past, started the first ever kind of real e-commerce site for AIG Insurance. He was there. Ton brand leader, brand marketing, brand building. He was tasked with opening the first ever Leo Burnett New York City office recently, a few years ago, and sits on all sides of content, technology, brand storytelling, and everything. So you're going to learn a lot. This is going to be a good one. Tom, thanks for coming. Did you bring any beer?
I was told there'd be beer here for me. I don't want to get this off on the wrong foot, but yeah.
Okay. We will hire an intern, and then we will have that intern bring us beer.
Deal.
Well, we're going to get into the beer topic, but I want to get right into a meat and potato. I want to get people right off the top, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about you and your history. But I want to get right off the top because our audience has an issue with privacy. CHEETAH Digital is in the privacy business, whether people understand that or not. Privacy is the key word right now. It's the buzzword. Everybody's being held accountable for privacy of consumer data, specifically what we like to talk about. But you, being a brand marketer at large ad agencies, inside of brands, still consulting big brands. I mean, we're talking large brands, people, global brands, Samsung, Volkswagen bunch. I won't go down the list, but you have a point of view. And I want to hear, what do you think brand marketers are doing right now behind their own closed doors? Nobody knows. What are they doing? Are they pulling their hair out about privacy? Are they trying to figure out how to manage this? What kind of technology, what people, what resources? What do you think's going on behind closed doors?
Well, first of all, there's change in the wind, right? So, with change, smart companies, smart brands understand that, there could be new opportunities. And if they don't adapt to change the right way, there's going to be big problems. In this case, there's going to be massive problems, including fines. So to me, it's mission critical that the brands understand what's happening with these privacy changes. Mm-hmm. And ultimately the word compliance strikes fear into the hearts of all marketers, and they scramble to understand how to become compliant. So to me, this is a compliance story as much as a privacy one, because that's in reality where it starts. It doesn't start with, what's privacy mean? It starts with, how can we become compliant? We've lived through this before, and we might want to talk about COPA and some other things. I've certainly lived through it before. So to answer your question, so typically the company first starts to the legal department or to external legal resources, and the lawyers sit there and think about the new beach houses they're going to buy.
Right.
But seriously, it's important because there's millions of dollars that are at stake year in and year out here. But so when we talk about compliance and brands in general, and you look back through history again with COPE and some other things, there's some interesting things. For example, the FCC passed a law, I believe it was in the 90s, that really enforced networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, et cetera, to have to program at least 3 hours, I believe it's 3 hours, of educational and informational programming every week.
And some of that still exists today. I mean, the big watchdogs are making sure that public programming and even down to local programming makes its way into ad spaces and things like that, 2 minutes an hour, etc.
And what happened was, again, opportunity was in the wind, right? So a company called Litton Entertainment realized that there was a business to be had here. So they went to the networks and they said, not only will we make sure you're compliant, but we'll create that programming, the actual content itself, that will keep you compliant. So quality programming, et cetera. And then fast forward to now, Lytton is now owned by Hearst Television, and they maintain compliance for all these companies. They produce all that content that you see. But again, this all came out of
compliance.
Yeah,
you have to comply. So got it. So Lytton is really a service to all these other networks that have to fill that compliance gap and check that box.
So in this case, content compliance, not just privacy compliance.
Yep.
But let's talk about COPA. So today, to most CMOs, first of all, let's talk about privacy again. So they first turn to the lawyers, but to most CMOs, this is a digital issue, privacy, right? So they're turning to their digital agencies, saying, help me figure this out. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And the digital agencies in turn are trying to wrap their heads around it, of course, and get new resources in the door that can help. So right now I see a lot of CMOs, and when I talk to them about it, it's a mix between the legal department and their digital agencies.
Okay.
But again, flashback to COPA, because I remember living through COPA. I think that law went to effect around 2000.
And give for everyone who's watching, give us the short rundown.
So COPA is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. But just like with changes in this privacy law, there was a change in privacy law there. So all the brands that I was working with at the time, it had to understand, well, how do we quickly become compliant with this and not get sued? Okay.
Sure.
Really what I saw happen at that point is that brands turned to their companies that were running their sweepstakes and other things, because the sweepstakes thing was a big thing with COPA. So the brand would say, hey, look, I entrust you, right? Whether you're McDonald's or whether you're a smaller brand, to help me become compliant with this new COPA thing. So again, I think we're seeing that today with the digital agencies.
Okay, that's really interesting. You didn't see it, and just before we walked into the studio, we dropped a podcast that we recorded yesterday where we talk about Martin Searle, who S4 and his agencies are getting in and saying, hey, look, we're going to get compliant, we're going to get the tech, and we're going to get the know-how. It's almost like they're going back to college to figure out what does zero-party, first-party data mean, because they've been using third-party, and now they have to change their services to help out these brands. These brands don't know what to do. So, and not only that, they realize there's a ginormous load of money to be made if you can get people compliant. I'm going to ask you a follow-up real quick, though.
Yeah.
Put your brand hat back on, because I think one of the largest issues, which we also dropped in our last podcast, if you didn't see it, go to episode 2, is legislation isn't there. Right now, all the legislation's at a state level. So if you're a brand, you've got to deal with California, you've got to deal with Rhode Island, you've got to deal with all these different disparate states and their laws, whereas, Senator Gillibrand in New York is trying to propose a watchdog. I think a lot of people are proposing it. She actually has legislation she's putting forth. So brand marketing hat, 20-second answer. Would you rather deal with one devil or 50 different devils from a compliance standpoint? Because right now there is no, it's like weed. It's a wild, wild west. Like we're not quite sure. Which one would you want to deal with?
One devil. Again, because I'm going back to COPA, because COPA was the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So like Florida had these crazy COPA compliant laws.
And they have much more stringent sweepstakes laws right now than any other state, or except for DC and New York borough.
Yeah, but isn't it funny? It takes a law to make a brand do the right thing.
There's a lot to be said there.
But the other thing to be said is, again, I don't want to beat this COPA thing to death, but it gives me such flashbacks. One of the things that we learned is becoming compliant was one thing, but remaining compliant was a completely another thing.
Yeah.
So for small brands, this was a huge problem, because it would cost six figures a year.
The resources to even just like understand what compliance means, let alone actually getting compliant.
So I don't know, but in your experience, with the privacy, because you guys are experts in this stuff, and I'm certainly not yet. I would need to be.
Sure.
It's going to be, I imagine, it's going to be extremely expensive for brands to adhere to this,
Well, the good news there is companies like CHEETAH, we're putting technology in place that helps get them over. The way I've been telling people is, hey, look, there's a street fight that's happening. Your brand has to drive through it at some point. when the legislation comes down and they say, this is it, the A's, the B's, the C's, this is what you have to do. GDPR happened 2 years ago. So when those brands have to drive through that street fight, they better be prepared. And what CHEETAH's trying to do is say, hey, look, we know if we collect permission-based data right now from people, forget all this Cambridge Analytica and grabbing data from here and there and third party and cookies and all that. If you collect the right data now directly from John Doe, Jane Doe, your consumers, you can almost get in a helicopter and just go over that street fight. Like, stay out of it. Be compliant before the laws are even built. That's kind of, where we're trying to take our clients. So.
Interesting. Yeah, that's smart. Makes sense.
Well, let's segue there because I know you have some thoughts. You're an agency guy. You've been at large agencies. You've controlled hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, and I don't want to know how much. You definitely have swayed some of my favorite beer brands, some of my favorite car brands, some of my favorite, brands. The third party, everyone's talking about the death of the third party and the cookie and the tracking. And the cookies aren't going away, but what's going away is your ability to identify who that cookie is and what that cookie means for. What's the scariest thing for a brand right now with the death of tracking these cookies and the intelligence they were getting behind them?
Well, you think about cookies, right? So think about cookies in real life. Right? They're full of stuff that's bad for you, right?
Oh, come on now.
So
they should have called them beers.
But ultimately, cookies can make you fat and lazy, right? Is that
that's
too
great.
Deep, too controversial, right?
No, that's great. That's smart.
Well, I think as marketers, that's part of what's happened, quite frankly. So I think the scariest thing is to kind of return to really the discipline of what marketing's all about, right? So I started my career at a time, of course, when the internet was just beginning. I know it's hard to believe, but
you look so good.
Thank you. I was waiting for that. It's about time. It's about time I get some love on this show. But guess what? Hundreds of years before the internet, of course, they're great brands built great relationships with consumers without spying on them, right?
Yeah.
By listening to them, by understanding them, by innovating around their lifestyles, and there was even a thing called focus groups, believe it or not, back in the day. And a well-run focus group, you would get genius insight out of it. A poorly run focus group, which most of them were horrible because it's the way you ask questions in focus groups, et cetera. Sure. But when I think back at those things, it's really, again, it goes back to great brands huge brands like Leo Burnett had a hand, of course, in a lot of these back in the day. Kellogg's, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, P&G, et cetera. No cookies, no fat, just smart insights and understanding the consumer. So I think that the hardest thing is to kind of relearn what we already know, is that everything in our business is about people and their behaviors. And so it's our job to understand, to change, and to measure those behaviors. Now, when cookies came along and a lot of other technologies, it helped us kind of cheat at that. Right?
We got fat.
Right. And so the good news to me is it's kind of relearning, like I said, rethinking what we already know about how we deal with consumers. I hate the word consumers. I like to say people, right?
Sure, they're people.
So I think that's the biggest lesson here and the biggest blessing too. It gives us a minute to stop, think, look back and say, okay, let's get back to treating people like people, not like consumers, and not having to essentially spy on them to understand them.
Yeah, no, that's great insights. I like the way that you put that. We got fat on it. We got lazy. We let technology do the work, and frankly, we took our heads out of it. Okay, cool. So I want to move on into kind of content and the consumer in control. Like 15 years ago, when you had me coming into the fold here in a kind of a brand marketing perspective, content was king, right? It was all about content. But at the same time, we were saying, hey, man, the consumer's kind of in control, and the internet was growing and video was starting to grow and consumables. I mean, the explosion that you and I both witnessed, it's unbelievable. But I'm going to ask you, because I think you'll have a great perspective on this. Is the consumer truly in control in an age of cookies and cookies dying and privacy and everyone beating their chest from a legislation standpoint saying we're doing this for the consumer? Is the consumer truly in control these days?
Well, I think the good news there is that you can be in control, but it takes work. So the way that people can find, experience, and communicate with brands has changed to a degree where they can control those factors, right? When it comes to privacy, though, we see studies from Pew and others that you guys, of course, have all read that says consumers want to be able to choose how their data essentially is used.
Sure.
But when I talk to brands, and in fact, I was talking to a CMO of a brand in California, where they're already starting to obviously adhere to all this compliance stuff. They have databases. This particular brand has databases, tens of millions of people in it. And they say statistically, almost 0% have requested any information from the brand or asked to be removed from the database. Now, so just because I have the ability and the legal right to request my data, doesn't mean I'm going to do it.
Sure.
So let's start there for a second. Back to what I said about human behavior.
Yep.
Changing human behavior is hard, right? So on the other hand, if I do ask you as a brand for that information, you better have it. You better be able to give it to me and share that information in a way that legally that you have
compliance.
So one CEO told me behind closed doors that out of the millions and millions of people they have in their database, only a few dozen have requested any of this information. And he said, and then when they looked at those requests, he literally said, and we realized that most of these are the kind of people that wear aluminum foil on their heads because they don't want the aliens reading their thoughts.
Yeah.
Because there was some really just bizarre kind of stuff that they communicated.
Yeah.
So I know it's early in the process, and that's going to change. With the laws changing it, the more, like I like to say, marketing got us into this problem. Marketing is going to get us out of it, right? So. From a marketing standpoint, there's going to be, consumer privacy groups and others that are going to, and the media, of course, is going to be writing more and more about this. So as consumers become more aware of it, they'll start to take those actions that they're not quite taking just yet.
Got it.
And then there's some brands like, again, using marketing to get ahead of it, which is smart. And create even sort of fun ways to tell consumers about what they do with their data and what the rights now the consumers have to understand that. There's a Channel 4 in the UK, for example, did a fun little video.
Yep. You shared that with me. It was very cool.
Right. So
we'll post that here in the link and on our blog so you can actually. It's a really great 2-minute video.
So again, ironically, using marketing to kind of address the problem and which I think is the way to do it. But if you make it difficult for a consumer to take any kind of action, whether I'm trying to sell them this or whatever, they're not going to do it, right? So it's they traded years ago for convenience their data, and that's what the internet did. Is obviously it's like. It's more convenient me to do it this way. I'm going to do it. So now to kind of dig out of that is again we're asking them to do something they typically haven't done. So.
Got it. Cool. All right, I want to change into some more fun topics since if anybody's still hanging on to the podcast right now, they got their lessons of the day, and we certainly have more. But let's dig into some fun things. You're an interesting cat in the fact that. You founded a beer company called Dive Bar Beer. And what I loved about it is right on the can, it says, "This is the beer your dad drank after mowing the lawn." And like that image in my head from an East Coaster Philly boy, like hot summer day, I can totally see it. And as I was a 12-year-old kid, I was like, I don't know what that is, but that looks delicious. So, but tell me why, because you didn't start a beer brand to become a billionaire in liquor. I mean, it's a great story. So, I think this is an inspirational story from a marketing perspective of having some fun. Like it's experiential marketing 101 to me, but explain why you created Dive Bar Beer and what it's all about.
Well, I'll tell you why. I mean, at the top of this, we talked about change, right? And change is opportunity. So, living in Denver for as long as I have and watching what would happen with craft beer and then traveling around the country and around the world as much as I do, I just became fascinated in like the rise of craft beer. And so, at one point, I would ask bartenders, I said, what's the number one question people ask you about craft beer? And the first year or so, they said, what's your best local craft beer? And then I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So they're selling a lot of local craft beers. And then I come around, ultimately to that bar a year later, and I'd say, what's the number one question they're asking you? And he or she would say, what's the lightest craft beer you have?
Oh.
Because I could tell the palates were starting to get burnt out on the heavier, hoppier beers, right? For one. Secondly, I realized that the story of craft beer really is the kind of beer your dad drank after he mowed the lawn. All those beers that we know today, that we call dive bar beers, the PBRs, the Schlitz and all that. These were hardworking families that came over from Germany and other places and started that. They were the first craft beers. So we decided we wanted to be the anti-craft beer for that taste profile. But more importantly, we've known each other for a long time. That punk rock guy in me was like, you know what? Craft beer is becoming pretentious. People are sniffing their beer. Bartenders are making you feel like an ass because you don't understand the difference between an IPA.
Especially here in Colorado where there's like 1,000 of them.
400, dude.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So
it's overload.
So we're right now we're in the process of actually moving dive bar beer from Denver to Memphis, which is a city I fell in love with a few years ago, helping to produce a music festival there for the last 3 years. And whereas Memphis they're just starting to really enjoy the craft beer movement, and I think there's less than 10 craft breweries there.
Cool.
400 here. So, it's a hardworking blue collar city. So, it's a great music city, obviously.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's why I got into the beer thing. So
cool. It's great. If you can find it, Dive Bar Beer on Instagram is a great one. In fact, I'm going to segue right here. You've been around the block. You and I have been around the globe together. We've slept in the same, not even hotel room, probably slept in the same bed a couple of times here and there. There's plenty of stories to be had there. But because you travel so much and our brand marketers and our clients are always traveling to large cities, New York, Chicago, LA, etc. Top 3 dive bars right now. Name them.
Top 3 dive bars?
I bet I know. I'm going to write this down, okay? I bet I know at least one of them. Go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you a surprising one. Jimmy's Corner.
I just wrote Jimmy's in New York City. Jimmy's in New York City. It's where you can find Tom when he's in New York.
It's true. It's 44th and 7th. This is the heart of Times Square. It makes no sense that this bar still exists. And it's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
And, and so I started going in there, who knows, 20 years ago or so. And you're right. Every time, and I'm in New York a lot, I have to stop.
If you're looking for Tom, you look at Jimmy's first.
Yeah. And like any great dive bar, as much as the world around it has changed, it has not. And including the sign in there that says, let's not discuss politics here. And the TVs, Jimmy has only put the TV on, I think 3 times, I was told, over the years, the volume on the TV, Kentucky Derby, Super Bowl, and something else. So Jimmy's Corner. So we'll stick to U.S. dive bars, I guess.
Let's just stick to U.S.
Chicago, Rossi's, Rossi.
I'm looking at it right here on my map. That's a joke.
Jeez.
That is a total joke. That's literally what I'm looking at. It's like 3 blocks from Leo Burnett's office. It is definitely my favorite dive bar. It has a great broken dart machine. It has a huge wall of coolers. You can go in and just buy singles of any kind of beer. All right. So, wow, I'm 2 for 2 here. And I swear to the Lord on my kids' names, we did not plan this.
And it's right over the bridge from Leo Burnett.
Yeah, it's right across the bridge. And it stays open super late. And are they cash only? I think they're cash only.
Well, great dive bars are cash
of course.
only. Speaking of cash only, my third one's going to be Hinano's in Venice.
Washington Boulevard at the beach.
Okay, yep.
Peanuts on the floor, 2 pool tables. Yep. Coldest beer in LA, I think.
It's, again, I'm going to call it a dive bar. Great burgers. I'm told I'm a vegetarian, so the best burger I ever had actually was a veggie burger there because they cooked it on all that meat, that meat-soaked grill. But Hinano's, again, I like it because it doesn't make sense that it still exists. No booze, just beer.
Yeah, just beer. That's right.
And and only cash. And they have great bands that show up in there, like Billy Idol, who I know you know. His guys from his band come in and jam there and stuff. So it's I'd start with those 3 and give you a little more.
That is definitely I'm sure you and I could go down a list as long as our arms. Okay, cool. What are the top 3 things? What top 3 events? I know you're way into music. all kinds of things you produce. You co-produce it's the Memphis Fest, right?
Yeah.
In Memphis. What are you most looking forward to in 2020 from like an event perspective?
Well, from a business standpoint, I'm looking forward to the New York Auto Show next. I try to go to the LA and the New York one every year on the media days or press days, whatever they call it, and because you can get some really great insight directly from CMOs and from the other people responsible for marketing the cars. But as a kind of a car guy, it's also cool for me to see how they're adapting to electric and the different consumer needs, and this whole mobility thing is so huge. So I'm looking forward to New York Auto Show this year.
Okay, cool. CES just happened. You were at CES, and you're there every year. I didn't go this year, but what was the coolest thing that came out of that?
The coolest thing was I didn't even visit the floor this year, so I spent so much quality time. A lot of the brands have these private suites and things. So I had a great meeting, for example, with Comcast, where they showed me some things that they're developing. We talked a lot about OTT, and we talked about how those platforms are changing and things like that. So Vizio is an amazing brand. They're doing some incredible things. They also have, I think, the best food at their parties, lobster tails.
That's good to know, because when you have to choose what to do and what party to go to, you gotta know that stuff.
No. So CES is good. I mean, CES is a great place to go. For me, I like to be inspired. I usually speak at it every year. This is the first year I didn't speak at it in the last 6-7 years or whatever, which was nice. So to me, it's just I go there to be inspired to meet people that I typically wouldn't meet from other places around the world, and to learn about obviously what's next.
Yeah, cool. Any closing thoughts? You want to talk about your new gig? You took a new gig, right? You and I didn't even get to talk about this, but after we turn off the cameras, we'll go have some beers and figure it out. What are you up to?
Yeah, very close to taking a new gig with a division of Hearst Television. I shamelessly plugged it earlier. It's Litton. So Litton Entertainment, which makes TV shows. Cool. And so there's a lot of reasons to be excited about being part of the Hearst family. And the story of Litton Entertainment is amazing.
Cool.
And so I look forward to kind of last few years I've spent more time on the content side than on the brand strategy and creative side.
Yep. So all right. And Sprocket NAB this year?
Yeah, Sprocket. I was just at a Sprocket event in LA, which is at NBC Universal. So Sprocket.com. Now we finally own Sprocket.com, so we could talk about that.
And that's SPROCKIT.
That's correct.
It's not ET, it's IT. Sprocket.
Sprocket, which is an amazing marketplace for innovation.
Yeah, I mean, we were a partner there. If you're at all into the content space and technology space around content, from distribution, television broadcast, multimedia, the NAB Sprocket booth every year is an amazing place. I was a big part of that, and our company was involved in that.
Thousands of square feet now. So,
giant.
At NAB, yeah.
All right, cool. Well, cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. How can people find you? I follow you through Instagram when you're cruising around the dive bars.
Yeah, I mean, I think LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me, and by the way, I love the idea. I love the name Thinking Caps.
Thanks. Thanks for wearing your thinking cap.
Well, as a bald guy, it's great. I get to wear a hat.
Well, we have a closet full of caps in case
so
somebody shows up without one. So
I always have one.
We're always prepared. Cool. Well, this has been a great pleasure. First guest on Thinking Caps has been Tom Flanagan, a brand marketer, a content guy, a real visionary guy. You can always find us on CHEETAHDigital.com. You can find us soon on iTunes if you didn't already find us there. Always check out our podcasts on Podbean. And follow us all on LinkedIn. Tom Flanagan, appreciate you having on, man. We'll have you again soon.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
See you guys.